Happy October, everyone! This is Jeznar back with some more gaming news. This month, I'd like to focus on horror games, more specifically what games help define this genre, and which horror games you should consider checking out this Halloween. First, I want to do a flashback to the early years of video gaming with a quick history of the first horror games. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, the very first 3D survival horror game ever created was called Alone in the Dark, and it was released just for PC. Alone in the Dark came out in 1992 by Infogrames and became the first survival horror game. The creator's inspiration for this game is loosely based on the writings and works of H.P. Lovecraft, which also makes Alone in the Dark the first horror game where the player fends off supernatural attacks. Granted, there were other horror games that we made before Alone in the Dark. Some of you might have already heard of, maybe Killer Shark, which is based on Jaws and was released in 1972. Also Haunted House for Atari, which is based on Friday the 13th and released in 1983. Castlevania, made by Konami, which was released in 1987. And lastly, Doom, which became a global phenomenon shaking up the entire gaming industry, was released in 1993. This game was developed by id Software, and while heavily inspired by Ridley Scott's Alien and Evil Dead, Doom paved the way at raising the bar for what consumers consider an acceptable horror video game. Over the next 30 years, the evolution of horror-style gaming exploded into a large variety with different types of subgenres for consumers to enjoy. Let's take a look at these 3 horror game subgenres. There are hundreds of horror games, all ranging from puzzle solving to first-person shooters and now even virtual reality. But what if someone is new to horror and needs a good place to start? Luckily, we can organize most horror games into 3 types of subgenres. First is survival horror. Survival horror is when the player is put into a horror setting, like a zombie apocalypse, with limited resources, times, etc. This subclass has games that most horror game enthusiasts have heard of and played, most notably, for example, the Resident Evil franchise by Capcom. If you enjoy this type of game, be sure to check out Dead Space Trilogy for PC 360 and PS3. Dead Space paved the way for modern sci-fi horror, and surprisingly, it still holds up to this day as one of the top horror survival games of the subclass. Fans are hoping EA will remaster the Dead Space trilogy for newer consoles, but no confirmation yet. There are tons of survival horror games out there, but be sure to check out Evil Within 1 and 2, Alien Isolation, Outlast, and Last of Us 1 and 2. The second subgenre is psychological horror. This genre I find interesting because it plays with your emotional, mental, and psychological states instead of using monsters to scare you. It forces the player not to trust their own eyes, to question their sanity, and to not recognize their own self throughout the game. The most popular game of this subgenre is Silent Hill series by Konami, with Silent Hill 2 generally regarded as the best of the franchise. There are, however, many other psychological horror games that fall under the radar. Layers of Fear, which takes place in a creepy Victorian mansion where players feel confused, deranged, and a little mad. Amnesia: The Dark Descent places you in a castle where you're searching for erased memories while being hunted by a dangerous presence. And Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is the one only of its kind because it expands elements of psychosis disorder so the player truly feels the horror of what is going on in the protagonist's head. Also consider Soma, Visage, Pathologic 1 and 2, and Observer if you are looking for more psychological horror games. And finally, our third subgenre is the dreaded jump scare horror games. You've probably heard of Five Nights at Freddy and the Slender Man games, which were released about 6 to 8 years ago. Since then, horror games that rely on ambiance and sound effects for suspense and surprise have become increasingly popular. Recently, one game to note is Nevermind for the PC. This game is unique because it uses pulse sensors that can tell when the player is scared, which it then uses that information to make the game even scarier. And on the flip side, don't count out point-and-click games just yet. Stasis, a successor of Sanitarium, is considered one of the scariest point-and-click games with some sci-fi horror mixed in. With so many to choose from, it can be tough to narrow down and play good jump scare horror games. But be sure to check out Fatal Frame 2, Cry of Fear, Condemned Criminal Origins, and The Exorcist Legion. No matter which style horror game you decide to play, the month of October is an excellent time to try new horror game experiences. Halloween is a time to honor the dead while also confronting your own mortality. And what better way is there to confront your own mortality than enjoying a horror video game themed beer? Oh yes, I have found one. Located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Modist Brewing Co. has an impressive variety of beer and, most impressively, offers an imperial stout called Lord Humungus. This complex motor oil thick stout was aged within the grains of a rye whiskey barrel for about a year, then rested on copious amounts of Madagascar vanilla bean, and marshmallows were then added. The inspiration for this insane beer is from Mad Max and the Thunderdome. A shocking 53% of the behemoth stout is made with malted rye, chocolate rye, and caramel rye, giving it a spicy rye character. October is the perfect month to watch Mad Max or even give the video game a try. That's it. I hope you all enjoyed this special video game news session. Be sure to tell me what some of your favorite horror games are and any other recommendations you may have that I may have missed. Have a happy and safe Halloween, everyone. This is Jeznar signing out.
All right, Jeznar, way to deliver once again. You never fail to deliver.
No.
You help us out so much.
It was such an amazing detail on horror games. Thank you all. Thank you for that, Jeznar. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we love you.
Yes.
You do a great job every time. We could not do this segment without you.
No, we couldn't.
We've tried in the past, and we got through it, but it doesn't
right.
always work.
Yeah. We need your information, and you are bar none the best that anyone has ever seen.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So what I really liked about what you were talking about is that I really liked the history.
Yes.
The history of the horror games.
History of it, yeah.
So
I didn't know too much about it. I
I
learned a lot from what you said.
I know Alone in the Dark, obviously, but knowing that it's kind of the kind of recognizes the first is interesting to me.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've played Doom. I mean, we've all played Doom. Even this guy's played Doom.
Yes, when I was a young kid, yes. Yeah.
Great series. Doom was. It's one of the only first-person shooters that I really appreciate. Maybe that and Wolfenstein.
Or
another old school one, Wolfenstein.
Golden one. It's not horror, but it's good first person.
I think you mean GoldenEye.
GoldenEye.
Golden one.
Golden one. Credit. It's a bank.
You see what I'm dealing with here, people? You see what I'm dealing with here? Golden one. I had to figure out you were talking about GoldenEye. I mean, it's not a stretch because you talk about first-person shooters in GoldenEye, but in Golden One credit union. Okay, so anyway, Doom is great. Yeah. So, but let's talk about the different genres you brought up. So the first one, survival horror. Obviously, that's the most famous. That's the most famous for sure because Resident Evil. I mean, obviously, the Resident Evil franchise is it's Resident Evil. I mean, it's the pinnacle of the franchise. But she brought up a series that is the Resident Evil franchise, but to me is better. Other than maybe Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
There are from the survival horror franchise. There are games that I put up there, and Resident Evil 4 is up there. The other games that are up there is the Dead Space series to me. So I love that you mentioned Dead Space because, God, I love that game series so much. I will go back and play it repeatedly. And even it's rewarding on New Game Plus too. If when you play it, you can further upgrade weapons and stuff like that. But I just love that series so much. There's such a replayability factor with that series to me. And to hear you talking about them remastering it and possibly,
hopefully,
I mean, I'm all for it. I'm all over it.
The first Dead Space, where you have no fucking clue what's going on. You play that shit in the dark. And we talk about jump scare video games later, but my God, the jump scares in that movie, in that fucking game, holy shit, it scares the shit out of me.
And Dead Space 2 as well.
Yeah,
Dead Space 2 is ridiculous.
And you're in the dark in those games too.
Dude,
sometimes you have no clue. Just a flashlight and like what the fuck is going on?
The sound effects in those games are great. If you play it at a really high volume with a good sound system, it's fantastic. I really love Dead Space 3 too. It doesn't quite capture the scariness of the first and second one, but there's an element of Dead Space 3 which comes close to making it my favorite in the series. Is they changed the whole weapon system, and I'm like, I would sit there at the bench and just make weapons and just craft shit for a while. Like it was just so much fun. Like I love the way that they mixed it up with, instead of just making the third one just a carbon copy of the first two, but with different levels and a different world. Yeah. They added a new element that made it fun. It was a longer game too, and there was multiplayer elements. There was and again the weapon system was so different, and it was still fun to craft weapons and make customization. There was an element of creativity there as well, which didn't exist in the first two. While the first two were scarier, the third one had so many more elements that made it just as good, if not better, than the first. It's a great series.
Great series.
I love that game so much.
Games. Play those fucking games.
Absolutely.
Great series.
And especially if you like Resident Evil, Dead Space is like Resident Evil, but with a sci-fi element and better controls.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
Like it was just like it was such a refined, well-made game that. It's tough to beat in the survival horror genre. The psychological horror genre is something that's interesting to me, because she mentioned Silent Hill 2, which I'm an old school.
I'm ashamed of myself right now. I've literally not played any of the Silent Hill games.
Really? So okay, so
I feel ashamed.
Well, I mean, Silent Hill can be hit and miss. Yeah, it can be. But
what system was that on? The first one.
Silent Hill the first one was on PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
Silent Hill 2 was one of the early hallmarks of the PlayStation 2 system that really showed what it could do.
Yeah.
And because it was before Metal Gear Solid Sons of Liberty came out. Yeah. So Silent Hill was like really showed what the system could do as far as a third person viewpoint and movement and graphics and just the graphics were ahead of its time. After that, it had been surpassed, obviously, by games that came after. But at the time, I remember going into the freaking video store and renting that game.
Renting it, huh?
And playing it and just being blown away by the atmosphere that it created. And Silent Hill has never been known for its controls. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Its control and gameplay has always been kind of the death of that series. Yeah. It's never had great controls and gameplay, but the atmosphere that Silent Hill 2 created, and the story just, it sucked you in and just made you want to see what happened next, and it was so creepy and so like when you're walking around and just waiting, you hear the shit sounds in the background. And it messes with your head too, and like there's elements where you're like the main character you're wondering is like the guy you're playing as, like is this guy really there, or is he psychotic, or what's going on? And it really adds to the overall story, and it's a really great game. At this point, it's super super old school.
It's pretty old school.
But that's why I like that you brought it up, because it brings me back to those days of, recency bias is a thing with anything, but especially video games. Like, people forget about how there were so many great games that came out, not even on old, super retro generation systems, something like the PlayStation 2, where there were so many great games that came out, and Silent Hill 2 is one of them that just revolutionized what was going on, and it was awesome. And I'd like to see more games like that. And you mentioned some of them. that are in there that really build atmosphere and that do things for you in that department of building atmosphere and a psychological level. Then you have the jump scare games, which you talked about too. And I'm not big on jump scare games.
I don't think I've played any of those games she mentioned at all on her on what she said. So I think kind of just go off what she said, and I think.
Well, the daughter was in the Five Nights at Freddy's for a little bit, but I mean,
I've never played any of those.
Kids were big into Five Nights at Freddy's for a bit, but it's kind of goofy. But it also has this and Slenderman is another one she talks about as well. And there is an element there that is scary, legitimately scary. They have their own merits. It's just I feel like it's a genre that hasn't been quite as well explored. That could be very that could lead to some, especially in VR.
Yeah.
In VR, you could get some really cool elements out of that. And there's some of the games she mentions have already done that, but. None of them have the kind of universal appeal that say something like Resident Evil or Dead Space does. Or quite the refinement, because those games are very refined, and very well crafted and stuff like that. And you don't always get that with some of the more niche games, but as time goes on, you'll get more games that can kind of do that. But in their own specific genre and not just the survival horror like Resident Evil or Dead Space or games like that.
Yeah. And then she talked about the video game a horror beer from Minneapolis. Was it Lord? I don't know how to spell it.
He's got to check his notes.
I don't even know. It was a stout. It sounded very intriguing. From Mad Max.
Well, but the to me the spice elements, like the marshmallow and the vanilla spice element
sounded pretty good.
It did sound very good. Yeah, so, I mean that's been done in stouts before. But it'd be
spice elements.
Vanilla and marshmallow and stuff like that. But I'd be interested to try it to see kind of how it meshes and how it kind of mixes and stuff like that. And you know what? Anything inspired by Mad Max has got my vote.
Exactly.
Because,
got my vote.
I like me some Mad Max. Whether it's Mel Gibson or Tom Hardy, I like both. They're both great. So
there you go. Right on.
Have you seen Mad Max?
I have not.
This fucking guy, I swear.
I'm pretending I have.
This guy. He's got that hairdo and he's never seen a Mad Max movie, right? What the fuck?
It's inspired by my own brain. That's why.
Such that it is.
All right. Well, I think that wraps video games up. Wraps up episode 7 of Beer Night. Thank you, Jeznar, aka Jenna, for that lovely information you gave us on horror video games. We appreciate it. It was very good. Very, very, very good. I enjoyed that a lot.
I can't listen to anything you say because you haven't seen any Mad Max movie. So
whatever.
Like everything you say is obsolete to me. It's pointless. Yeah. There's no reason to listen until you've seen a Mad Max movie. You haven't even seen like the new one? What's the new one called again?
I don't know.
Help me out, Jeznar. What's the new one called?
Looking at me like I know.
Yeah, what the fuck am I thinking? Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Fury Road. That's what it is. See that? Yeah. See, he just got a glimpse. He got a glimpse into the mind of a psychopath, like Silent Hill 2. You saw the light bulb went off. Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah.
You haven't even seen that one?
No.
Well, I'm sad that the second match is coming to the end because otherwise I would drink the vodka out of here to, wash away my sorrows.
Okay.
That he hasn't even watched Mad Max yet.
Yeah. Oh well. Eventually, I'll get to it. Eventually.
Of course, he barely played Doom either, so.
Yeah, I barely. Yeah, whatever. I was young. Who cares? I'll play it again eventually.
No, you won't. No, you won't. You won't.
Whatever. Well, it's been a pretty epic evening, huh?
Yeah, I'm starting to get drunk.
You're starting to get drunk?
If you haven't noticed.
No. babbling on. I think that's it for Beer Night episode 7. Please follow us on Twitter at Beer Night Pod or on Facebook at Beer Night Podcast. We post a bunch of random shit on Facebook.
Do we?
Follow us, like us, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button.
Like button, not the like button.
No, yeah, hit the thumbs up like button. Hit that. Hit the bell so you make sure you get every video that pops up when we upload.
There's a bell?
There's a bell. You hit the bell and then it'll pop up whenever videos upload for people that are subscribed.
Isn't that what the subscription is for?
It's different. Don't worry about it.
It's different?
Mr. YouTube aficionado guy here.
I am very old.
Very old. Because even, whatever. I handle all the social media shit. He does shit.
What the fuck do you do?
I don't know. But yeah, no one's even watching the ending of this segment anyway.
I think you posted on Twitter like a year ago.
I think so. I finally got Twitter up and running, so I may post more here and there.
You may.
I may.
You may.
Not like it's intriguing anyway.
I may play more Dead Space.
I think I'm right there with you. Now we say good night, good fight.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Get some candy. Give me some Reese's. If you don't want it, I'll take it.
I love Reese's.
So
drink some beers while you're at it. Good night, good fight. Cheers to ya. Beer night.
Smash some pumpkins.